Welcome into the Inquirer podcast. Happy opening day to all those who celebrate, and Piper and I do. Got my Sox gear here. Piper with the Cardinals hat. Hope springs eternal, so I am not disappointed yet in my team, and Derek Piper rarely is disappointed in his team. It's always nice to be a Cardinals fan because you have reason to be optimistic. You know it's probably going to be a pretty good season, but you guys kind of like Illinois basketball, Derek. You want to take it to another level.
Yeah, I think that's a good comparison. I think also our good friend Joey Wagner with his rumblings and grumblings about the Packers, and we sit back there as Bears fans and say, dude, your life's not that bad. It's okay. You go to the playoffs every year. I get it. I'm spoiled in the baseball section of things. And yeah, I'm looking for an extended run in the postseason. And I think we've had one NLCS appearance in the last, 7-8 years. So it's been a while, but I get it. A lot of fans would trade places with me for sure. And I'm excited for Jordan Walker Day. Happy Jordan Walker Day to you and yours. And let's get it going for baseball around the country.
I'm excited for Jordan Walker Day, and I'm not even a Cardinals fan. Whenever this kind of prospect comes up, it's awesome to see, and it's awesome to see that he's not being held down for 2 weeks before he comes back. So I like that part of Major League Baseball. We altered that rule a little bit. But that's not why you showed up to this podcast. We got a lot going on, Derek Piper, about Illinois basketball because there is no offseason, as Bill Belichick likes to say, no days off. Derek Piper, you know that well. So how's the portal in the offseason treating you so far?
It's survival mode. It's exhausting. I don't know how Brad Underwood and his staff do it. The fact that a number of guys hit the portal on a daily basis and trying to keep track of who's involved where and who's a realistic option. And do some of these guys already have predetermined destinations? I think that's something that we've seen more and more of as the years have gone on with the portal is a guy might hit the open market, but he might already have a school in mind of where he's going to go, or maybe it's a handful of schools. So it's really on the staffs to try to do the research and the ear to the ground stuff. And you start to hear some buzz throughout the season of, this guy might be looking around after the season and all that. So the work that I do as far as digging into the information and who Illinois is involved with, it pales in comparison to what the staff does, but it is a lot. I mean, there's a lot of dudes out there and it's exciting. Look, I mean, the fact of years past 4 or 5 years ago, it might be a little bit more of a, these handful of grad transfers are out there and there's maybe 1 or 2 guys that leave, and it's a lot different. Now it's a lot more of that fluctuation transition. Some people hate it, and I understand, but also there's a lot of opportunity out there in the portal. And as we know, Illinois has shown that they can go out and get dudes.
Yeah, the portal giveth and it taketh. And anybody, I just saw somebody on our message board, T. Scott, just went through a depth chart with the 8 guys who are currently on the roster. And I'm like, don't do this to yourself. Like, let's do this exercise in a month when we know it's actually going on, when we know who's on this roster, who's coming in, who's heading out, because we still probably could see some attrition on this roster. I'll talk to you here about that, Derek. But before we get to that, Andre Kerbel in the portal is being reported now, and AJ Storr doesn't list Illinois among his options. So a former Illini commit that went to St. John's doesn't have Illinois on his list, just to put that out there. But the biggest news, of course, Derek, not that it's shocking the way the season ended. We could read the body language. Heck, we could read the tweets around the people surrounding him. Jaden Epps heads to the transfer portal. I'll just open up the floor to you, your reaction to that and what it means for Illinois.
Significant loss, disappointing for a guy that looked like a foundational piece, someone that could be an all Big Ten caliber guard throughout his career. I know that we talked on previous podcasts, even as early as next season, the type of numbers that Jaden Epps could potentially put up in that backcourt. Now, of course, it would depend on who you bring in. If a guy like Terrence Shannon were to return, Coleman Hawkins, that could affect what his volume would be. But just in general, someone that had a pretty darn good freshman season. I know it tailed off there late. I know the concussion when he was having to be hospitalized overnight and didn't play a whole lot in the postseason play, whether it was Penn State in the Big Ten tournament or the NCAA tournament. But I know the three-point shooting lacked. He shot 25% from 3 in Big Ten play. But look, I could come up with a number of guys, freshmen, that in their first season in high major basketball, especially those playing major minutes, that didn't shoot the best percentage from 3. I think that he's a very capable three-point shooter. Not a knockdown guy, not a 40% guy, maybe at least at this stage, but someone that's capable and a better shooter than he showed late. Loved his ability to get to the rim. Is he more of a scoring guard than a pure point guard? Absolutely. And Illinois was always going to go out and get a point guard in the portal, whether Epps was here or not. I think the fit with him was something that I was really curious to see how they would go about that, how Jayden might approach that, because I think that he thinks of himself as a point guard, but there's no doubt that the tea leaves were there, the signs were there as the season went on. He wore some visible frustrations. There was questions about that Northwestern game at home. I know Mike's talked about that, just his body language on the bench and everything, and some of the exchanges. Like Brad was tough on him. I think Brad was tough. Not that it was across the line or anything, but it's interesting how gambling or doubling down on we're going with these freshman point guards, number one, hurt Illinois and put these guys it's kind of that give and take, because you got a lot of opportunity on Jayden's plate. Some people are going to look and say 25 minutes a game, what more could he want? But also when the struggles are there, then some of that is amplified. Some of the critiques are amplified. And yeah, his camp made it clear that they didn't love the way that Brad coached him, and it's not for everybody. And you can take sides on it. You can say the kid's soft. You can say the coach is crazy. Maybe it's somewhere in the middle. I don't know.
Yeah, usually it's somewhere in the middle. This point guard situation completely backfired on him, right? Like it is. Mike said it the other day on the podcast. Your guard play was not good enough to win. I think the other parts of your team were good enough, Derek, to potentially have a run. Of course, Matthew Meyer did not shoot well when he needed to shoot well. RJ Melendez did not shoot like he was expected to shoot. And Luke Goody was hurt most of the year. So the shooting part of it hurt. But I mean, Matthew Meyer was what you hoped he would be over the entire season. Terrence Shannon, I think, was probably better than what you thought he would be during the entire season. I know Coleman Hawkins was up and down, but him and Dain Dainja were a front court that you can advance with, I think. So, but guard play really held them back. Shooting was a part of that as well. And then you don't get the upside of it, Derek, of getting them back for a year. And that's why I thought continuity was so important. And when you lose Sky Clark in January, it didn't even last that long. And then you lose Jaden Epps at the end of the year, that plan completely backfired. So what is the reaction now to it for Brad Underwood? Especially, I mean, you mentioned the way he coaches guys. Like, I'm fine with a coach getting on somebody. Jaden Epps made some big mistakes, as you would expect from freshmen. Like, go back and watch some of that film defensively. His decision-making in some of those games late hurt you at times. So I understand why he get on them, but you also have to know your players. And you also have to have, I think, the Tom Izzo relationship where you can get on those guys, but they also know you love them. So I find both of those things fascinating for Brad Underwood moving forward. Is what does he get at point guard now moving forward? And, how does he kind of balance this? I'm fine with coach getting on people. You have to when they make mistakes, but you also have to have that strong relationship with them.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, we saw in the previous regime with John Gross, he wasn't a guy that got on dudes, at least as far as we could tell, as nearly as much. But then you had
there was no accountability.
Yeah, questions accountability. And Brad is definitely going to hold guys accountable, try to have that toughness DNA, and he's going to push people. And sometimes it's not for them, but it was fine for Ayo Dosunmu. It was fine for Kofi, Trent Frazier. There have been many that it's resonated with, and they've welcomed even being pushed. So, yeah, like late in the game against Indiana, when Jayden breaks off a play and goes to the rim and dribbles it off his leg, you're going to expect to hear from a coach in that type of a sense when that happens. So I agree on the other end, though. I think Brad, and I think he's done this, and it's part of the psychological part of being a head coach is what works for certain guys, what doesn't. I think we've seen through the years, sometimes he gets on others more than some that he maybe even doesn't need to get on, or just doesn't feel like that's going to work for them. So I don't know. It's a tough thing.
And I do want to mention, like, he changed the way he approached this team, right? Like he called them out after the Penn State game. They didn't respond to it. And he acted a little bit differently. He's going to have his, he's going to be Brad Underwood. I don't think he should change who he is completely because it's worked for him. Right. But with this example of it, I know there's a huge debate with the fan base right now, but you got to get guys. And this is maybe the bigger question, Derek, we can get into. If you're going to add high school kids nowadays, you got to get guys who are completely bought into this. Like, you got to get guys who are, and I don't know how you find that out. Like, I figure Ty Rodgers is like that, but I mean, do we know that for sure? Like a year after, or when you're recruiting him, Sincere Harris seems like that guy, but I know people have questions. Is he going to stick around? Like those are the kind of guys I think fit that bill, but it's just, you never know, I would imagine.
Yeah, I think there are some that you feel pretty good about it with, like a Luke Goody, Ty Rogers. Yeah, I think Sincere is someone that you would hope is bought in, and he definitely, in terms of his role, I don't think Sincere had any gripes about, hey, I didn't get a ton of shots, or I was fine playing a lot of defense this year and going with energy and everything. But then again, he exceeded expectations of a lot of people, and then going forward, he probably thinks of himself as someone that deserves another step forward, or at least the opportunity to earn that. So that's kind of how you go into every offseason, and you assume that probably there's a handful that you can already pencil in that are back, and then maybe some others. It depends on who you add and what their role looks like. And sometimes you miss on or just someone doesn't understand what it's like until they go through it. Like, you might have someone that you recruit and say, man, this guy's tough as nails and is going to be all in on us and everything, and then go through it. And it's different. It's different when you actually experience it. So,
and you made this point, Derek, the expectations of top 75 guys is I'm going to be the guy right away.
Yes.
And, they've succeeded all their life. And maybe it's not just the kid or the young man, it's the people around him, that just expect him to come in and play against 22, 23-year-old transfers as well as they did against high school prospects. And I think a guy like Ty Rogers, especially this year, like you talked to him throughout the season, he understood the process. He understood like this wasn't going to happen overnight. That seems like it can be pretty rare for a guy as highly recruited as Ty Rogers. Not that he didn't struggle with that or whatever, but he seemed to understand it and take it in stride. Not all guys are built like that. And, when you're Illinois was going to recruit a guard, whether Jaden Epps was here or not, and that would have been interesting to see who they get, how Jayden would respond to that. Because listen, these kids have the ability now to transfer whenever they want, and I'm for that. But now you can also get over recruited immediately, and coaches should do that because they can't count on anybody being there for multiple years.
They have to look at their roster year by year, which is really that tough two-way part of it. Is we want continuity. Ideally, you'd like to bring in some freshmen that would stay for a couple of years, and then you can have that traditional maturation and piece that together with transfers. But at the same time, like you said, if there's a wing that you really want to go get, then if you have a young guy on the perimeter, maybe he doesn't have that, okay, as a freshman, this guy left, it's supposed to be my turn now. Oh, wait, they bring in this guy. I'm getting out of here. So that's the new dynamic of it. And the staff doesn't want to be, just like many, held hostage to the fact of, we recruited these guys. We can't go out and get people. I think that there was that with the point guard situation. They tried to toe the line of, we're going to be in win now mode. We're going to go out and get Terrence Shannon. We're going to go out and get Matthew Meyer. We're going to have returnees that we feel really, really good about. And at point guard, we have two that we hope can click as time goes on. And it was really all, again, people are tired of hearing about it. It was all about March. It was all about getting those guys amped up, ready, the experience. And by the time that you got to the tournament, they would hopefully be ready. But it was a gamble, and it definitely backfired based on the way that Sky left and struggled. Epps now gone, and he had his limitations as a freshman. But yeah, the payoff was supposed to be, regardless of how the season went, that you'd get those guys back, at least one.
Yes, at least one. You'd have two guys. Like that's what I kept saying was throughout the offseason, you get two of them. So if one of them doesn't work out, and I thought it would be Sky because of the injury more than anything, you had another one. But now you have neither of them.
Yes. So I think that, the obvious is Brad never wants to be this reliant on freshman ball handlers ever again. And I think that I'd be very interested, and we'll never know this, but what if Courtney Ramey came in, or what if a different point guard came in, and say Sky still leaves and Jayden is in a little bit more of a backup role and doesn't have the same type of pressure on him to deliver this year? How would that have gone? I don't know. I think that's an interesting.
Because Brad had to be hard on him because he needed him ready for March.
Yeah,
right? You're our guy, and then there's that whole like. To be honest with you, like the Adam Miller one and this one are the hard ones for me, because it's like you are a part of a successful team. You played a huge role on that team, yet it wasn't enough. Now, of course, they want to find happiness elsewhere, and they're allowed to do that. And I'm fine with them doing that. But like from the outside, it's harder to kind of rationalize that compared to like a Brandon Podziemski who just wanted to play and it really worked out for him, or Andre Curbelo who decided I want to go, I need a fresh start, right? Like those are really understandable. This one I struggled a little bit more just in the basketball side of things.
Yeah, for sure. On paper, you're scratching your head. Why would someone that played 25 minutes, that got handed the keys in the middle of the season and seemed to really do well with it, like for that stretch from bragging rights through middle of February, looked pretty darn good. I had the stats.
Looked like the top building block of the future of this program.
Yeah, 12 of 15 games at one point, double-figure score. The performance at Iowa, sat back there, 16 points, 5 assists, no turnovers, and a high-intensity rivalry game on the road. Like, just wait till this dude's a sophomore, junior, and unfortunately, you don't get to see that. That's the unfortunate part, as I sit back and think about it, is that you don't – the Trent Frazier examples, there are obviously others, to see the full career arc of a guy in college. And that's what sucks for the fans. And that's why a lot of fans hate the portal, because they can't latch on to a certain player. You go out and buy a player's jersey, and they might be gone the next year. Like
I would not buy the freshman jerseys, to be honest with you. I would buy the all-time great. Buy an Io jersey, buy a Kofi jersey. I would buy an Andres Felice jersey if I were an Illini.
Yeah.
Right? Like that's what you go. That's kind of what I do if I want to buy a White Sox jersey. I go, I don't know if that guy's going to be here. Or I could buy a Yohan Moncada and he doesn't work out as well as I thought. Buy the all-time greats.
But the fact of now it's to the point you could always risk that in the pros. Like if you bought an NFL jersey, I used to joke with my brother, whatever jersey he'd buy, the guy would get traded the next year. And it's to a different level now. There's more movement in college than there are at the pro level. So there's even a higher likelihood, especially if it's a guy that hasn't transferred before, you get their jersey, they might not be here. So I thought that one of the cool things, of course, expectations were there. We wanted to see what the team would do at the end of the line. But one of the fun parts I thought for the fans, or even just covering some new guys, was just the progression through a season of this freshman. Like, what was the game going to be like? The light bulb comes on game for Ty Rodgers or for Jaden Epps, and how was that going to set them up to be building blocks for the future? Like Jaden Epps at Madison Square Garden against Texas, that was a huge moment to come up in the clutch in that game to overtime. Iowa, unfortunately, don't get to build upon that going forward. But kind of to circle back to what you said, I think that to get a transfer point guard that has a lot of experience, that can set up others, be more of a pure playmaker, that's something they'll look for. And I just think in general, there is also a lot of appeal, big picture, to get transfers that have multi-year eligibility. Like to look what Brad has loved up on Texas's roster. No, that's not because he was going to Texas, but because Marcus Carr, Dylan DeSue, Timmy Allen, guys that they brought in at Texas that had multi-year, so that they also had the let's go hunt in the portal, but those guys are going to stay for a few years.
Tyrese Hunter, another one. Here's just to wrap up the Jaden Epps conversation. He's a loss. He's a significant loss, and doesn't mean they can't go find somebody who can replace that production. But I think there's a lot of value in keeping guys who know the system, know the coaches, know what you're doing. And for the fan base, I agree. It's a lot more fun to watch those guys kind of come through. But whether it's Georgetown or NC State, they're getting a good player. Not a perfect player by any means. I thought defensively he was better than I thought, but he still made some mistakes. He needs to improve a lot consistently as a shooter, needs to improve as a facilitator, because I do think he's an undersized two guard. But we saw the makings of a player that could be one of the best players in all Big Ten player for Jaden Epps. And to lose that is painful, because it was such a big recruiting win. You saw what he could be, and you lost him. So that stinks for Illinois. You lost Brandon Lieb. Not a shocker. I am sad that Lieb's season is officially over, but I think we were wondering when this would happen. I feel like Brandon Lieb is kind of a throwback, Derek, kind of the last vestige of the late prep recruiting edition. The guy who kind of in the spring of his senior year has some flashes, and a bunch of Power 5 schools take a chance on a guy that probably was a mid-major recruit at the time. But a fantastic kid, program guy, made an impact against Minnesota, played some spot minutes, but not surprising. Go find a role at a lower level, Brandon, and find a spot to start.
Yeah, you said it there. Like the trend was 4 or 5 years ago was if you had a spot available in the spring, take a guy that's a fringe, probably like you said, probably a mid-major guy and see if he works. Take a project, take a Matisse Facile, take a Greggy Boyd-Badine, like Anthony Higgs, like take somebody that's got whatever reason isn't the surefire high major guy and see if you can develop him over a course of handful of seasons. And to Lieb's credit, he has gotten better. Like what he showed this year was by far and away his best as a Illini. 16 appearances this season. The Minnesota game to come in when Illinois had foul trouble. Even the Ohio State game, like he blocked a future NBA first round pick in Bryce Sensabaugh. That was good for him. But yeah, he's still got 2 years of eligibility left when you include the COVID year. Go somewhere, play, use your experience as far as practicing at Illinois. You've got some game experience now, a little bit more. The dude went up against Kofi for 2 years in practice. Like if you put an ad around campus was like, we're going to study this new anti-anxiety medicine and we're going to put you in a pit of snakes, or you can guard Kofi every day for a year. Like people would sign up for the pit of snakes because you would be beat to crap every day. And you got to give Lieb some credit. You need somebody like that. Like I know that even me, I'll look at and say, like, was Lieb ever going to help you? I was very skeptical of that, throughout his time here. But you do need someone that is willing to go and practice and see if he can develop. It was one of those situations. It was a weird time in recruiting. COVID had just happened. He had low major offers after his senior year, and teams couldn't get out and recruit. The one-time transfer hadn't went through, and teams couldn't evaluate. So they just said, "We got a spot. Let's take somebody. Let's take a known guy that we can go get." So it was Illinois, it was Utah, Oklahoma State, DePaul, and that was a Chin Coleman recruit. Wish the best to Brandon, and seemed like a great kid. And yeah, got 3 years of an Illinois education.
Yeah, these are not the surprises of the transfer portal, right? Like no one was shocked by this, but love talking to the kid and wish him nothing but the best. It'd be cool if he goes to like Missouri Valley School or something like that. I think he could do really, really well there. By the way, I would still mark me down for playing against Kofi. He's a lot nicer, I think, than most snakes. So I'm going to go with playing against Kofi, but maybe I should talk to Lieb and Bossman's Verdonk.
After he dunked on you, he'd probably at least help you up.
That's right. Or at least he smile at me, not bite me or hiss at me. Dain Dainja decides to return. Derek, there's a little bit of question towards the end of the season. We'd heard some buzz that he could be potentially looking around. Of course, this would be a second transfer. So for him, a guy like Andre Curbelo, are they going to be eligible right away? We'll see what the NCAA does with that. I think Curbelo has a chance because his coach changed, of course. But what do you make of Dain Dainja returning, and what do you expect out of him in his second full season of playing college basketball?
I think all in all, he had a pretty darn solid year. Definitely exceeded expectations. I know that from where he was early February, I still remember our post-game podcast after the Rutgers game where he outplayed Cliff Amore, who's considered one of the top 5 big men in the Big Ten. It's like, well, man, has Dain arrived in that type of a range? But didn't finish that well for him. Was another guy that you wondered based on body language, frustrations, lost some of his minutes down the stretch, where his mind would be at. But of course, the multiple transfer rules that ultimately came down as far as you can't use coaching change, which obviously there wasn't one here, but they're very strict and stringent on, at least they say they're going to be, the NCAA on multiple transfers in terms of eligibility. I'm not saying that he was out the door. There just was buzz as far as him possibly becoming available. But going forward, I think it's a really nice piece to still have for theoretically eligibility-wise 2 more years in your front court. I think there's a lot he can learn from playing his first full season in college basketball. Just like we've talked about before, like knowing when to try to be a little fancy with your moves and when you just power dribble a guy and go up. And I think that he does have really good touch around the basket. He is skilled. Will the jump shot ever be there from like 15 feet? I'm not sure. I don't know that it will. I think the free throw.
Does he need like that? Free throws is more important to me than
Yeah,
like
for
an
sure.
active, because you can't spend so much time talking about Kofi Coburn getting a mid-range. I don't want Kofi Coburn shooting a mid-range jumper. I want anybody shooting a mid-range jumper at somebody like Terrence Shannon, right? Like, or RJ Melendez or something like that. I do not need my big man who's not a good shooter as a free throw shooter. Let's make free throws first. If he makes a leap to like 60-65%, that's huge because he draws a bunch of fouls. And if he's going to be one of the top offensive players on this team, he needs to make free throws.
Yeah, for sure. You want him bringing the ball up like they talked about back in the offseason?
No, because I want a point guard.
Yeah, I know. But yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see what scheme they run next year. I think with a pure point guard, a lot more ball screen. I do think about Dain like in that pinch post without the ability to just catch and shoot from there. You wonder if that's really the most ideal position for him. But someone who can feed it onto the into the block and be able to get some points. I think he does. I think Latulip has been dead on with his drop coverage. Like it was at one point, it was very good length. Was in good positions. Late in the year, he just like literally just kind of just floated back into the rim area and did not show that well on the guard, and just kind of got caught in no man's land too many times. So those are things that he can learn and they can rep in the offseason. I think he can be a nice piece. I know that Illinois is, regardless of what Coleman Hawkins wants to do, I think especially if he leaves, they definitely want another front court piece. But even if he does come back, I think they're interested in another 5-man. How you can sell that with Dane being there, with Coleman coming back, with Hansberry coming in, I think that's interesting. Like Virginia, Caden Shedrick just coming available, a legit shot blocker. And I know he was a guy you really liked out there in Vegas, had a great game against Baylor, 17 points, and then played well against Illinois too. That's a guy they have a legit interest in. Can they sell him on it with Dane there? And like I just said, with the other factors, that'll be something that we'll have to see.
Yeah, I want to break down a bunch of transfer portal options. So anybody listening, we will get to that. And anybody on our live YouTube, give us a like, subscribe to us. We really appreciate you guys. We'll get to some of your comments and questions later on. I'm starring them as we go through. You mentioned Coleman Hawkins, who declared for the NBA draft there. I find his decision fascinating. He is one of those guys who could be a potential second-round draft pick, or he could return and I think really boost his stock. We can talk about Terrence Shannon in a moment. I don't know how much Terrence Shannon can boost his stock. It's a weaker draft class next year, so maybe. But, he's an older guy. I know Coleman's getting towards the older, but Coleman's 21 right now. Terrence 23, I believe. So Coleman's got a chance, I think, to really up his stock. But I do think he's got a skill set that will interest people. But I don't know if he had the kind of year that's going to make him a guaranteed top 40, top 45 pick to get a guaranteed contract. So I do find it interesting what he told our guy, John Rothstein, you want to call him that. He said, I want to see what kind of roster I'm coming back to, which time's out, right? You have a month here before he has to make a month and a half before he's got to make an ultimate decision mid-May, late May, when he's got to decide whether he's coming back to school or staying in the draft. So he gets to see what Illinois is bringing in. And I don't blame him, because if I'm Coleman Hawkins, I don't want to come back to a complete rebuild situation. I don't think it'll be that. I think Illinois is going to get talent. But what do you make of his decision-making process?
Number one, Coleman's always going to tell you what's on his mind. A lot of people are thinking it. Coleman's actually, I know. Coleman's actually going to say it. I think that I agree with you. It's going to really depend on what he's told from the next level. And as you see the way that he's trended on some of these mock drafts, Sam Vecini, Jonathan Gavoni, he's dropped from where he was earlier during the middle of the season, where he was an early second round pick, maybe now middle of the second round. I know Vecini there in the 50s, and there's a lot of uncertainty about what that path would look like. Whether can you get a two-way in that spot? Would it be just you go into a summer league and there's not a lot of guarantees? And I think Coleman is going to make as far as I can tell, a smart decision, and at least an informed one. I think that Kofi, not to rag on Kofi, I think he had pretty well made up his mind that he was going to go, and I think this will be more feedback based. While I have gotten the sense that I think Coleman wants to go, and I think most people, I mean, that's their dream, to play in the NBA, to play professionally, get paid to play basketball. I think a lot of people that go through this process, they lean towards, if given the opportunity, I want to go. I think Coleman is in that, but there is quite a bit to be gained, I think, from coming back, because I think Coleman's a different third-year guy than a lot of people. Like someone like Terrence Shannon, has been a starter his entire career. Like Coleman just now got that this year. I know he started a little bit the year before that, but to play more of a primary role, there's growth points that can be gained from that versus someone that maybe as a junior that's been a 3-year starter, you kind of are who you are. I wonder about Terrence. I wonder that if they're going to look at Terrence and say, you're an older guy, you didn't catch and shoot as well this year because you played more with the ball in your hands. We know that you can attack the rim with athleticism. Are there things that he can clean up? Absolutely. But I think Coleman's one of those where maybe he can find a little bit more consistency. I know Brad chuckles anytime he gets asked a consistency question with Coleman in a press conference, but I think just shooting the three at a little bit of a higher rate, 28% from the college line, is going to be a big red flag at the NBA. I think that,
if they have questions about Iowa as a shooter, they're going to have huge questions about Coleman as a shooter.
Yeah, definitely. And I don't know, as far as playmaking on the perimeter, can he pass? Yeah. Does he make some bad decisions? That needs to get cleaned up? Yeah, for sure. But pick and pop, if he could be a pick and pop 5-man at the next level or 4 or 5, whatever, that would really complement his defensive versatility, which we never have any questions about. It's the biggest reason why they love him, because there's so much switching in the NBA. He can pretty much guard anybody. Yeah,
let's have the Terrence Shannon conversation. Let's be honest, reasonably does not make sense if he is a top 40 guy. If he's told he's a top 40 guy, those guys, I know first round picks get guaranteed contracts, second round picks are not guaranteed. Top 10 to 15 second round picks now are getting guaranteed contracts because they're so cheap and teams lock them in and you get a good deal like Ayo Dosunmu for a couple years, right? So if he's a top 40 pick, he's going to get a guaranteed contract. Maybe he has to go to the G League for a little bit, but he's still going to probably make really good money. If he's a two-way player, he's not guaranteed that contract, but that's a $500,000 deal. So he can make a lot of NIL money because he's worth a ton to Illinois. He might be worth more to Illinois than he would be to an NBA team right now. And he could be one of the best guards in college basketball. And if he has better guards around him, Derek, maybe he can showcase his skill a little bit more. But still, for a guy who's 23 years old, how much more can he gain from that? So that's why I'm still skeptical. I would go all out for Terrence Shannon. I would pay a high price. If I'm the Icon Collective for Terrence Shannon, if I were Brad Underwood, I'd encourage the collective to spend a lot of money for him, but does it make sense for him?
You said it. If he's an early second round pick, you compare it to what the deal Ayo got, 2 years, $1.1, $1.2 million a year. How do you compete with that NIL wise? And how do you tell Terrence, if that's what's on the table for him, that he should come back? I don't think you would. I don't think he would come back.
And that's a positive for you to get him drafted, especially when you're going out to the transfer portal, right?
For sure. A guy that wasn't certain to be drafted last year comes into your program, gets to be a big piece, and then gets that guaranteed contract if that is what is ultimately in store for him. But he is being projected, ESPN, The Athletic, early second round, top 40 type pick. I have a hard time. I think that Terrence always was dead set on coming in 1 year out. I'm not saying – I think he is, based on the buzz that I hear, he is open-minded as far as what it could look like if – based on the feedback, if he's not where he wants to be, that coming back is something he'd legitimately consider. And yes, I think there would be a lot of money on the table for him. It is a different conversation if you're talking two-way contract. Like you said, $500,000. I think Illinois could go beyond that in NIL. It could also be more of a guarantee. And there are some things he can work on, but at the same time, there are, like, even Ayo Dosunmu coming back. I know that he was mocked in the first round, and some, like Sam Vecini, thought he was a late first-round pick. He fell unexpectedly. Like, how much better was his stock at the end of the day after another year at Illinois, an All-American season, shot the three better? He was viewed as, hey, he's an older guy. There's some things that he's not a pure point guard. I think with Terrence, you're going to see some things in terms of off the dribble that they might question. It'd be great if you could get him back. I think his value is tremendous. Like, not only because he'd be one of the best guards in the country, but because of, like, the continuity piece. I think he could maybe really dig into the leadership standpoint if he could do that and really just have even more of a vested interest in sweat equity in Illinois. He's a beast. I'd like to get him back.
Yeah, he ain't perfect, but boy, he's really good. He's really good, and he was a big reason you made the NCAA tournament. Haven't heard anyone else. We've heard Lieb. We've heard Epps. What do you expect for the timing of this? I mean, Do we hear, like, you know what I mean? Like, this is kind of a tricky subject because it's, guys can make decisions. Pods made it later in the spring. So what do you kind of expect him moving forward, Derek, with the rest of the roster?
All I know is if anybody does it during the Cardinals game, I will be very upset, and I will be hiding from an emergency podcast. No, I'll oblige. But I think that we'll have a couple of guys that are going to wait and see. That's my gut read. Kind of what I've heard is you're going to have a couple of guys wait and see, similar to Pods. Even, let's be honest, similar to Coleman last year, who admittedly said, "I'm waiting and seeing how this thing goes with the roster makeup."
Yeah,
I
because
think,
they were going after Nance and Meyer at the same
yeah,
time, right?
yeah. And I'll be honest, I think Sincere is one of those. I think Sincere Harris wants to see what guards they bring in because they are being aggressive. They're going after a number of guys. Of course, they want shooting. I think that a lot of people, fans, really want to see Sincere back. The staff wants Sincere back. And I think there's a lot of value in having someone that can be that gritty defender. I still like his upside quite a bit. I think if you work on his finishing around the basket, get stronger, work on his shot that's not broke by any means. I know his free throws were pretty bad, but his three was capable. It's just how he sees his role at Illinois when more of the dust settles in the portal. I think that you could include a couple of guys in there. We might hear maybe, one or two as far as we haven't heard anything from Ty Rodgers. I don't know if he's going to come out with I'm staying. I expect him to stay. I know Luke Goody, when we had him on the radio, kind of just laughed at the fact of, do we really have to recommit to the program we're in? Like,
It's kind of where we are.
it is kind of where we are. So maybe we'll get that from Ty. If that's something he's holding out on, that's going to really make fans nervous. But I expect him back.
Yeah.
It's going to take some time though for some till we really know. Like, I don't think you can say, even as the portal pursuits go forward, it's not like, hey, in a week we'll know all the guys that are staying for sure and all the guys that are out the door. I think it'll take some time. And look, some guys should have that ability to say, I'll wait and see how it turns out.
Yeah. All right, Derek. Before we get into some of the transfer portal options, Joey did a great job catching up with Brad Underwood and talking about how you build a roster now. Last year, I think, was an example of him trying to thread the needle, right? Let's stay good so we can continue to make NCAA tournaments, chase the Big Ten, which they were in the Big Ten title race until the final week of the season, and potentially make a run in March, right? And it didn't work out completely, but it didn't fail. But he also got a bunch of high school kids who were really talented and wanted to build through high school. He kept saying that. He changed his tone a little bit talking with Joey. So how do you think this past year impacts kind of how Brad Underwood approaches just building a roster in the transfer portal era?
A lot. I think probably a lot in terms of constructing the roster, what it needs to look like with veterans at key spots. As we talked about, ball handling is something I think they'll always want a veteran in that position. I think chemistry is something they're going to try to evaluate as much as you possibly can in the portal, and what motivates guys and how guys are in the locker room and that whole kind of deal, how they vibe with Brad, as much as you can gather from that. I mean, to an extent, there's so much limitation with a month or less of relationship building and trying to put in the calls on certain guys. But I think that's something that's going to be a big factor. And it's tough because I think that on one standpoint, you'd wonder what if Brad would have went the Izzo route? I still think Izzo was wrong for not going and getting the big man. I think he capped his team's ceiling. Not that they played great against Kansas State. Yeah. Credit to them. What if he went and said, if you take away some of the outside factors with Epps, if he said, Jaden Epps, you're my guy. You're going to be a starting guard regardless. And went around and said, hey, I don't want to recruit over certain guys because I want to make this more of a 2-year plan versus a 1-year plan. I think there is, though, a lot of pressure to win every year, to be competitive every year. Not only pressure, but that's what Brad wants. Brad wants a chance to win every year, and the portal affords you that ability to stack up your roster. So I don't think we'll ever see a team that has some question marks about shooting again. I think he's going to make sure that is taken care of, and a guard as well. So, and like I mentioned earlier, I think recruiting class will probably be smaller. 4-man recruiting class, especially with 4 all expected to play and help you, and really 5 if you include Moretti, and actually 6 if you include
Great.
Zachary Perrine. You're not going to see that again, I don't think. So that'll be different. I think it'll be smaller classes, more portal reliance, which I know makes some people antsy or just have a little angst, because we saw when you were leaning in on the portal this year, the chemistry never came together. And just that's something that you would hope would be better going forward. But maybe multi-year transfers. I know there's an interest in those, of trying to build something that lasts 2 years, maybe 3 years. So I think there are a number of different ways to go about it differently. And something to say that they were, I don't know, that they were dumb in what they did this past year,
Right.
but some things backfired. They learned some things. This was probably Brad hasn't said it flat out, but I think that he probably learned more this year than any other year at Illinois.
Yeah, and I think moving forward, just to kind of hit on your point, I think moving forward, you're going to turn over at least half your roster almost every year. I think we've seen it with Indiana. We're seeing it with a bunch of programs across the country. Michigan State was kind of the rarity, right? Where they get almost everybody back. And it certainly worked for them late in the season. But they had a talent ceiling, right? So Brad Underwood wants to win Big Ten championships and advance in the tournament and potentially win a national championship, go to a Final Four. So I think he's going to continue to try and add as much talent as possible. But if you're gonna add 6 guys every year, I'd split it down the middle there. 3 high school guys, 3 prep guys, or 3 transfer guys. I think that's probably a thing that could work for you, especially if they're multi-year guys. I think that would help Illinois a lot. All right, let's break down some transfer portal options, Derek, shall we? Lead guard has to be the number one priority here. Latulippe said he wants a mid-major guard who's a proven bucket getter. You got anybody that fits the bill there?
Jameer Nelson Jr. from Delaware, son of former awesome St. Joe's point guard and then a long-tenured NBA guy. He averaged about 20 points a game last year, explosive, 6'1", really gets to the rim well. Not the best three-point shooter, but a capable one. And I know Illinois likes him a lot. He's considered one of the top 5. I know that the transfer portal rankings for 24/7 are updating constantly, but he's someone that fits in the mold of kind of that low to mid-major guy. He has moved twice, or this would be a second move. He's gone from George Washington to then Delaware, but as far as I understand it, he's a grad transfer, so that supersedes if anybody's question, if someone's going to move for a second time, but they're a grad, the grad transfer is supposed to then supersede those rules, and they can go freely anywhere. So he's one of those guys. There are some other high major options in terms of being available right now. I know that I don't think Illinois is going to be involved in Caleb Love, if anybody's wondering about that. Kirk Ariza, same. I think there was maybe a little bit of initial interest when he first hit the portal, like, we played against him. He's pretty good, even though we could talk about that in terms of he didn't finish the year all that strong, turnover rate.
Played well at State Farm Center, I'll tell you that much.
Very, very well. Very well. Primo Spears, I will say him from Georgetown is someone, high volume scorer. He was pretty good at Georgetown last year. They put some feelers in on what I'm ultimately getting at. I think there's going to be another wave of transfers. I think that they're still going to be patient and wait and see if there's more in the portal that comes. And to be honest, like, they've probably heard of some names that might become available. So that's just the way this thing goes. And while I think they would like Jameer Nelson Jr. a lot, and they are in on that one. Beyond that, especially in terms of mid-major point guard, I don't know if I can target another one.
All right, Kyle brings up a name that's not in the portal yet, but he announced he's going to enter the NBA draft. Holy Toledo, Derek, who is Illinois bringing in at point guard? And somebody just asked about Ray J. Dennis, the Toledo point guard who just entered the draft. The coach at Toledo made it sound like he's going to come back if he doesn't go in the draft. Of course, that can all change. Yeah, Ray J. Dennis would make sense if he decides to enter the transfer portal, which he has not done yet.
Ray J. Dennis is really good. Illinois native, played at Oswego East, I believe. MAC Player of the Year. He's a big-time player. And, yeah, I mean, to be declaring for the NBA draft, I don't see him on draft boards. Like, in terms of Vicini's top 100, I don't think he's on there. Not on mock drafts as far as ESPN and The Athletic go. So I read the comments of his coach as far as getting the feedback, how that can be really important. And, yeah, we've seen that in the past where if even an Illinois guy goes and tests the waters when you expect them to come back.
Yeah.
So, we'll see how it goes. I'm sure that, I mean, obviously, if he were to hit the portal, he'd have a ton of interest and would be a highly coveted guy. Yeah, we'll see what he does.
Yeah, I don't have a concern, Derek, that's like Sincere Harris and Ty Rodgers are the point guards next year. Like those are secondary ball handlers, but like they're going to land somebody that's good. Like I am not, given Illinois' success developing players here recently, their NIL operation, Illinois should be able to land a really good league guard or capable league guard.
Yeah, I mean, they got a great sell as far as the opportunity, what they were able to do with Io in that type of role, Trent Frazier. I mean, Curbelo, when you look at his freshman year stats, and not that you need to go back to previous stops, but Underwood was pretty good with Juwan Evans. I mean, when he's had a really good point guard, Illinois has been pretty darn good, or Brad Underwood's teams have been pretty darn good. So I don't think that there's any issue with that. That's their prime focus in the portal. We saw what they were able to do when they said, hey, we want to go get some big-time wings, and went out and got Shannon and Meyer. And we know that NIL was a big factor there. I think that there will be the necessary NIL allocations for a big-time point guard. And I don't have any concerns about them connecting on that in terms of someone that's talented, someone that is a pure point that can pass and set some other guys up. I think they got a great sell, and that's number one on their list.
Shooting has got to be number two. And any names that strike your fancy, Derek? The Bryce Williams kid who Illinois reached out to him, according to a report, I think it was Portal Alert or something like that on Twitter. He makes a lot of sense. Averaged 13 points per game, shot about 40% from three. Yeah, sign me up for a guy like that.
Yes, there's a lot of those. There's a handful of guys that they have reached out to that are, you look up their catch and shoot numbers on Synergy, and then the 90th percentile, and they shoot 40% from three and even have some size, like a
fan me up.
Dalton Connect.
Yeah.
I mean, if his last name's Connect, I'm going to say he's a pretty good 3-point shooter. Northern Colorado, although everybody in the country wants him. I know Kansas is listed involved, and Carolina. I've heard Duke likes him a lot. He's one of the top guys in the portal, but he's someone they love in terms of wish list. He's probably the top shooter that they would really like to get. Cormac Ryan from Notre Dame, someone that last year his efficiency numbers dropped a little bit, 34% from three. The previous year he was about 40%. I think he was 42% in ACC play, but he's been a 40+% guy on catch and shoot. Someone that in the tournament has experience of going off like in an Andrew Funk type of way, like 7 threes against Alabama in a tournament game 2 years ago.
Isn't it amazing every time you play somebody, you're like, why can't we have one of those guys? Illinois did have one of those guys, Alfonso Plummer, 2 years ago, by the way.
They did. That's a good point. So I think Cormac Ryan is one of those. Nick Timberlake from Towson is another guy that's athletic and can also shoot it. TJ Bamba.
I'm going to be ridiculous with my Justin Timberlake references, by the way.
That would be entertaining. I think that would be fun.
Dun, 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 dun. All right, I'll stop.
Now, he's another guy that has a lot of interest, and I don't know that Illinois is as entrenched in that one. He's had a lot of in-home visits. I know that Rick Pitino's been in for an in-home visit. I think that Woodson, I think UNC. I have not seen Illinois be in with him quite yet. TJ Bamba from Washington State. I know Isaac Trotter wrote about him recently. Another one that spot-up shooter. I know he averaged 16 points a game and shot 38% from three in a high major conference. Sometimes with these transfers, you wonder, the old Mark Allstork, who put up like 20 a game there at Wright State. Then he transfers over to Illinois. It's like, oh, there's a different level of competition. Someone that's proven in a high major conference is definitely appealing. I know that some of his off the dribble numbers, not the best, but I think if you put him in a spot up role, get a point guard, he's another one of those. Again, like there are a number of 40% 3-point shooters, great catch and shoot guys with some size. That's a huge need.
Dain Dainja back. We have to find out what Coleman Hawkins is ultimately going to do. Ty Rodgers, I still, he can handle the ball, but defensively, he's a front court piece. So this will be interesting what they do in the transfer portal. Like, as you mentioned, Shedrick from Virginia, long, athletic, great rim protector. Probably could play a 20-minute a game role in the Big Ten. And would Dain Dainja be fine being the other 20 minutes? I don't know, but like that's a guy I'd be very, very interested in. So how do you expect them to approach the front court, Derek? Because if Coleman comes back, you might not need another piece. Maybe you take somebody that's young if Coleman decides to come back and have multiple years of eligibility. But if Coleman doesn't come back, they certainly have a hole to fill in the front court.
I think ideally they'd like some size. I mean, you look at Dain, 6'9". I think you would want someone that's maybe a little bit more of a shot blocker, rim protector type, and that the duality of Shedrick having some skill offensively, like his ability. I know that his jump shooting numbers weren't very good, but he showed that he could step out mid range, pick and pop a little bit. That's encouraging in terms of what you could possibly get out of him. He is someone also that he's athletic in terms of throwing him some lobs in the pick and roll and dunker spot, like you drive and kick him into that side baseline. That's something he can definitely do. And then, being able to block shots at the rim. Dain, 6'9", has that long wingspan, but I think that's something they would definitely look at. You want a different piece. I think that's something that they have definitely looked at because Peyton Sparks, guy that just transferred to Indiana out of Ball State, Illinois was involved with him last year. And then again this year, it was probably contingent on in terms of really pushing the gas. If Dain were to leave, that would really make sense. But he's kind of built similarly. Like he's more athletic than Dain in terms of like off the floor, that kind of stuff. But I think that they would like a 6'11", 7-footer. And if Coleman doesn't come back, they definitely want a stretch four. They definitely want someone that has the size but can play on the perimeter, shoot the three, handle a little bit, be maybe a switchable defender. I think that's something that they will really covet. But then it's tough because you got to wait it out. Like we'll see if Coleman gets invited to the combine, which he probably will. And if he waits it all the way through the end, sometimes it's tough. But then again, remember, similar to Meyer last year, there'll be guys that are in the draft process that aren't in the portal yet that I know they'll have to do it before the combine actually happens, but some might wait all the way till May, then hit the portal, and then you got a new list of names that are available.
I remember I was out for a walk outside here. I was going for a walk or a run or something, and Matthew Meyer was May. It was May when he committed. So yeah, this is gonna take a while, most likely. All right, Derek, let's get to a few questions and we'll wrap this thing up. Illini fan says, can you touch on the takeaways on the team's culture? Hard to build culture if the only returning players are role players not expected to play key roles. What do you think, Derek?
Yeah, that is tough. Even a guy like Luke Goody, who was someone that Brad had talked a lot about his vocal leadership, someone that embodied a lot of what Brad likes. He hadn't played a whole lot. And you bring in someone like Matthew Meyer, who's far more proven. When your most experienced and most proven guys are transfers, not to say you can't have that work out where they're leaders and they really grasp that and want that. Meyer didn't. Meyer didn't want to be that guy. Shannon did, at least that's what we heard. And then I don't know if he was quite the same build up as a leader as it played out. Now it's a new situation for him. And I think when you put someone in that type of a transition, it can be harder to be that guy who's still trying to learn. Brad Underwood still trying to learn what it's about to play at Illinois and try to be the follow me guy. But in general,
it's why I think Coleman Hawkins returning would be massive. I think he's got some leadership to him. He'd be one of the best players on the team. I think he learned a lot about being a leader this year because he put a lot on himself, and I at least like that accountability to him. So people can get frustrated with the play sometimes, but I think he's got that in him. And he's a guy who's stuck through stuff, right? I mean, he did not play a lot as a freshman. He got benched as a sophomore, as he should have, because he was struggling, and then he got through it and became better for it. So that's another reason I think guys like him, Luke Goody, Ty Rodgers, Sincere Harris, I'll throw RJ Melendez in there. I think he went through a Coleman-like year. Like, I think that's important to bring those guys back and then add around them. But Derek, all these players said they liked each other. Mm-hmm. But Coleman didn't mention the Sky Clark thing. I don't think he liked some of the drama of the younger players on this team, especially after what he had seen with Io and Trent and DeMonte, where that stuff was just like tossed aside, right? And it just wasn't accepted. They got to rebuild some of that, but I think most importantly, the on-court chemistry was bad because in January, the chemistry didn't look too big of a problem after Sky Clark left because they're winning games or beating some lower tier Big Ten teams, and they looked like they were having fun. And then February hit.
Yeah, I think that there is the truth to, like, off the court, these guys got along and had fun and liked each other. the on the court stuff, the collective buy-in. I think there were times where guys got a little too in their feelings about their own personal struggles or interests or whatever that was. And then just like to continually have this team come out flat like that, that shows that there's some kind of disconnect. There's some kind of lack of leadership, lack of, again, collective buy-in and really understanding what it takes to win and compete in the Big Ten and to have it really matter to them. So for Meyer not to be someone that, again, wanted to be a follow me, a type of leader, he wanted to kind of just do his thing and say, hey, I'm going to show up. I'm going to work. I'm going to dive into analytics. I'm going to shoot threes. And but
well, and I'll put some of this on Terrence too. I kept griping about why is he not aggressive early?
Yeah.
Because it coincided with Illinois. Like when he was aggressive, they were good. But it usually was second halves. Like I think he had some leadership qualities, but it just wasn't consistent enough.
Yes, for sure. That's a great point too. And I mean, Terrence sometimes got a little frustrated, and not that you can't have that. There were some moments of like adversity, or Illinois would be on the wrong end of a long run, and you'd wait and wonder, who's gonna in the middle of a huddle really like get into his guys' face or really rally the troops. There weren't a lot of that, like
other than Underwood.
Yeah. So that said a lot to me, and I do think Coleman could definitely be that coming back. I think that Ty Rodgers should be very comfortable and embracing that role. Luke, especially if he's able to progress as a player and really, I thought he shot the ball well down the stretch, and I think that he really wants that role. I'll mention, I think that Amani Hansberry is definitely a future leader. It's tough to do as a freshman. I just think he's a great culture guy. I think the fans are going to love him. The locker room's going to love him going forward. I think that's important. And that goes back to who you recruit. Like, I think that's important for chemistry too. But kind of big pick, like the easy way to say it, don't have 90% of your roster turnover. Maybe if it's 50 or 60, you have some of those mainstays that can really carry on the culture and be the voices. I think that would help going forward.
Agreed. Scott, bend that bill, DP. I think you can pull it off, Piper. I can't pull it off.
It's a little curved. Yeah. Now, you can't tell, but there are some like mashed potato stains. There's like one here and there, and I like to keep
throwing it at you.
Yeah, I like to keep my hats nice, but he goes crazy with the mashed potatoes, and I'm holding him, and he grabs the hat, and I'm like, oh man,
mashed potatoes is better than that like terrible toddler carrot stuff or peas or whatever that is. That would have been a hell of a lot worse. Tony said, "What's up, boys? Greeting from Marco Island."
Enjoy, man.
Did you figure out where you're going on vacation yet, you and Haley?
I'm going to Phoenix.
Good for you.
Yep.
Good for you.
Early May.
Yeah. And let's get to two more. Cubs fan. Good luck this year. Are you willing to call next year a prove-it year for Brad? Understand the program is back to being consistently solid, but top 8 national play comes with high expectations. No Sweet 16s in 6 seasons. Listen, there's pressure on Brad because of what happened against Loyola, right? There will continue to be that with the fan base, and I understand it. That was a real big disappointment. In the last 2 years, you get early exits as well. I don't think Brad Underwood's on the hot seat at all. What he has done at Illinois is remarkable. That said, Derek, if they don't make the tournament, yeah, we could talk about that after next year. But I think they'll be good next year. I think they'll make an NCAA. That's been the expectation here. So until proven otherwise, but sure, there's pressure on a guy who hasn't gone to the Sweet 16. That exists.
For sure. There is, and that's not going away. I don't think it's a Sweet 16 or else type of year for Brad Underwood. We'll see what the roster ultimately looks like. But, yeah, you expect to make the tournament year in, year out, and Brad would tell you that. I mean, Brad always has high expectations, and that's why they want to stack up the roster to make sure that they are a contender each and every year. I ideally would like it if it was, again, like we talk about, can they get a multi-year transfer too? Can they keep – as I look forward, could this be a 2-year window for Illinois?
What I would say, Derek, I think what you're hinting at is show me something you can build on. Because this was not a season you could build on. What did you build on this year? That's the disappointing part of it. Now, Shannon and Hawkins come back. Maybe we can change that conversation a little bit. But you thought this year you'd make the tournament, have a chance to go farther, but you'd have Sky Clark or Jaden Epps and Ty Rogers and RJ Melendez. And you know what I mean? Like maybe Coleman Hawkins for a fourth year. And we don't know of any of that. Like, are you building on any of that moving forward? So that's what I think. You want to see progress. You want to see a team that is a typical Brad Underwood team. This was not that kind of team. And then can we build on it? Can we bring all those guys back and then have that year, maybe in 2 years? Like, I don't want to throw out this year, right? Because I think you can still be good. And I don't think Brad Underwood is going to coach or build like that. But I think that's what fans would really like to see.
Yeah, and I hope we don't get rid of that in the portal, and that it's not ever going to be you build towards something. It's always going to be this year or else every year. And yes, if you bring back Terrence Shannon for another year and Coleman Hawkins for another year, then it is a prove it year in a little bit, I think, because you're going to have the dudes, you're going to have the carryover and the cohesion that you didn't have. I think that's where Brad couldn't say, hey, we're the youngest team, one of the youngest teams in the country, or we're one of the newest teams to each other in the country again. If you have what some of the limitations were last year, then there is that prove it sense, but not in the sense of his job being in jeopardy. I'm just thinking like 2 years from now, not to throw out next year either, because I think they'll be talented. Like Ty Rogers is a junior. Yeah. If Sincere is a junior, RJ, if he's still here, is a senior.
Goody.
Goody is a senior. Like
Dane. Point guard here. Yeah, insert point guard here, right? Like,
insert point guard. Hansberry is a sophomore. Morez Johnson is a freshman. A shooter if he was a multi-year guy. Like that could really build towards more of next year could be good, but the following year could be great. I think that there's obviously been that throughout Illinois history. I think that could be the case for Illinois, but we'll really know once the roster comes together, because there are so many possibilities for the way this can shake out.
Yeah. Caleb asked, do you think the criticism of Brad, especially with the portal, is unfair? Listen, when you're a top 10, 15 paid coach and you don't get to a Sweet 16, criticism is going to happen. Like, there is fair criticism. Like we've talked about, like the point guard thing blew up. We mentioned that was a big risk going into the season. But I still think Brad Underwood's a good coach. I think he'll be able to get talent, and I'm really intrigued to see what he puts together for this season.
You went out and got impact players in Shannon and Meyer and Dain. I mean, there's not a ton to fret about with who you ultimately landed. I mean, you can nitpick a little bit. Like, again, you get somebody from a national championship team, and you thought that maybe they would be a little bit more of a leader. But if you don't have Matthew Meyer, don't go to the tournament. When he was on, he was really, really good. There was a lull there in the middle of the Big Ten play when Shannon wasn't playing like he was earlier in the season. They've been a big player out there. Now, it was kind of the towing of the line of like, yeah, we want to go add transfers, but we're not going to add a transfer at point guard because of the guys we've brought in. So I think they've done just fine in the portal, especially like you mentioned earlier. You throw in Alfonso Plummer the year before that. Jacob Grandison was a really good addition that paid off and was a longer term type of a deal. So I don't have any problem with what they've been able to do in the portal, their appeal, their resources, that whole kind of thing. And you have to go hit the portal these days. Yeah, you have to.
Absolutely. I think we'll wrap it up. We went more than an hour there. There's so much to discuss, but we got to get ready for baseball as well. Thank you to the almost 400 people that are still with us here at this point. Give us a like if you're watching on the YouTube channel. We love doing this stuff with you guys, getting some interaction, answering some of your questions. Can't answer them all right now, and it'll be fun to watch how Brad Underwood and all these Illini coaches answer the roster questions moving forward. But thank you everybody for listening to the Illini Inquirer podcast. Give us a follow, rating, review wherever you get your podcast, and stay tuned to IlliniInquirer.com for the latest. Derek has been posting all his updates. Football has been busy with spring football. I got a golf story coming up that I had fun reporting out as well. So thank you everybody for listening to the Illini Inquirer podcast, and we will talk to you next time. Everybody have a great day and take care of each other. We'll talk to you next time on the Illini